Hey again, everybody, and those watching on the playback in the future. We have not been doing a lot of these this year because we started doing Diet IQ, diet intelligence posts. So if you're not following Kevin, myself, Austin Kiergaard, or anybody in our company who shares these, uh, once or twice a week, usually twice a week, we do reviews of a study in a pretty short format. For brevity, we just give kind of the key points, but with a citation, you can look it up. For these research reviews we record, we like to really do kind of a deep dive. I like to explain these as an unboxing. We're not going to give every single nuance and go through hundreds of supportive citations. Sometimes we will go over a meta-analysis and we can cover a little bit more ground. But this is really to kind of explore a topic together and then use a study or something that brings out some of the key points. And this particular week, I am going into personality traits, a form of social psychology, a discipline of social psychology, as an adjunct to what we did a couple years ago. And I'm going to use that first session as a little bit of a review, but I want to tap into more of how it relates to weight loss specifically and sustainability. So a lot of you won't remember this, but I want to go through some of the key points on what personality traits, personality psychology really is. And as we look at the studies today, it's going to be a pretty laser focused approach to just a couple certain components in personality psychology and character traits. And the reason I do that is there's something kind of surprising that's a little counterintuitive that I want to point out. But then for most of our time together, I want to back up and go into some of the things I think that can help us on a larger scale in making change. So personality psychology, I could be wrong, but I think as a formal discipline of psychology, it came from doctors Seligman and Peterson, who were also formative in positive psychology at University of Pennsylvania. And I'm starting with them here to give you the biggest view, and then I'll kind of scale back into the history. But they looked at, as their story goes, the DSM in psychology, which gives us all of the diagnostics for psychological disorders, things that a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a mental health therapist wants to work on. And I thought, okay, we have this big diagnostic manual for everything that goes wrong with us. We don't really talk about what's normal and how we can even enhance the positive sides. It's just based on fixing broken parts of our psyche. So they took some of the smaller components of currents at their time, personality psychology traits and inventories, and they kind of broadened it out to view every single character trait and, as they call it, virtue, the positive parts of who we are. And they came up with 24, which ends up being in 6 categories displayed here on this slide. And they're not completely symmetrical. It's not like, 4 of each or something. You can see this. But let me go through these categories: wisdom, courage, humanity, transcendence, justice, and moderation. If you look at those first 4, wisdom, and I'll go into the subcategories: creativity, curiosity, judgment, love of learning, perspective. I mean, those sound like they fit. These guys, obviously, this is their field. They did a great job. This is why I love this model the most. You if you have a high level of creativity, or at least that's part of that, and in a sense of curiosity, judgment in terms of, is this the right thing to do? Love of learning, perspective, you can see how those tie into wisdom. Courage, bravery, persistence, honesty, zest. Um, I would almost say you could even categorize these in 2. Like, you could take these 6 and put them in 2, and it's almost the right brain and the left brain. You're kind of a right wing thinker, a left wing thinker. You're a creative or more of a mechanical type person. So those are almost two examples, like the wisdom, their creativity, all of that is, um, kind of esoteric and just part of learning to love life, courage, bravery, persistence, honesty, zest. Like that even smacks of let's just get shit done. And then humanity is kind of back to wisdom, love, kindness, social intelligence, interaction, integration, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to skip over to justice, fairness, leadership. That's back to getting things done. Transcendence, appreciation of beauty, art, gratitude, hope, humor, spirituality. We're back to more of the, staying in your brain, appreciating, loving life. And then, moderation, self-control, prudence, again, hard-edged, mechanical sounding traits. So, you have those almost bifurcated two categories, but then they divided it into six with all of those little subcategories. You can go to values in action. Maybe it's viacharacter.org or something. I think I have it on here later. And you can take an inventory. And out of these 24 traits, you can, learn where you are. I'm going to come back to why that's interesting and important. But let me keep going and show you a couple other ones. That's first of all the book that you could get. There it is, viacharacter.org. Um, we all kind of started with the Myers-Briggs just decades and decades ago. I did this one time in my life, and I just haven't had the muster to do it again because it's a pretty heavy survey. But I mean, I feel like it is a little bit dated. Like when you look at these things and you read through, it almost kind of has a 1970s, 60s vibe of, what you might do when you grow up, your profession, that sort of thing. You're a healer, a teacher, a counselor, field marsher, and mentor. Again, formative, great stuff. This is where a lot of these personality inventories came from, but that's certainly another one you can go back to. It's just not, I think, the most relevant. Um, and there could be more. I'd love to hear you guys if you know more that I'm not aware of. The big five is the real popular one. A lot of online people talk about this because it's simple. It's just five. Um, I think it definitely leaves some gaps, but extroversion, of course, extroversion. Agreeableness is almost like introversion, but again, just worded just differently. Conscientiousness is going to come up a lot today. Self-efficacy, again, orderliness, dutiful, getting things done, achievement, striving, self-discipline. Again, that's the doing part. Neuroticism is like conscientiousness overplayed. It's you can be conscientious and like that's good. Like you're the one who keeps the scorebook. You're the one who gets your family there on time. You're the one who is making sure everybody's not dying of salmonella in your kitchen. But you get neurotic and now nobody likes you. That's conscientiousness almost too far. So again, kind of a positive and a negative. Openness to experience, that's kind of that transcendence and open-mindedness thing. So this is one that is in vogue. A lot of people find these inventories, and it's just kind of a fun little party trick. Everybody does it. Uh, what some people have done is they've taken the big five, and this is what I'm going to get to with that VIA scale, and they've decided to look at the scale. Like you can be open, like way, way, way open, or you can be not so open. So think of this as a 0 to 100 scale. And that's what the character traits and values has done. Instead of saying, well, you're extroverted, and let's say that's a good thing. You're outgoing, you're the life of the party, you're going to be the one to ask questions. But is there a negative side to that? Kind of like conscientiousness to neuroticism. This particular chart somebody made to make both ends kind of positive. So let's look at neuroticism, the one that I said was, kind of an overplay of conscientiousness. Well, in a good sense, if you're neurotic, you may be secure and confident. Think of the biggest narcissist you know. You would say, well, a strength of being a narcissist is you're pretty confident. Like you never think you're going to lose, and you're always showing up. You're very secure. It's a very, very kind way of saying that. But if you overplay that, now you're overly sensitive, you're nervous, probably have an anxiety disorder. So you can take these traits, and they're not all necessarily good or bad. It's just how you play them. So one of the studies we're going to look at today use a 10-item personality inventory, which is using the big five, but they do give them an antithetical negative aspect. So agreeableness, for example, sympathetic and warm. Agreeableness reversed is critical and quarrelsome. So that's obviously not agreeable. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this was one that is used in some survey studies and so forth, because when the big five was made, it did leave some of those gaps. Well, is it good or bad? Which way we're kind of leaning here. Is there an end to each? So this is the study that we did a couple years ago, and to be honest, I cannot exactly remember why I chose this one, other than they did end up tying, as you'll see, part of it to nutrition. But it was in a school, University of Pennsylvania, so a big high psych school, but it was their departments of economics. And they were looking at personality psychology because it was born, that discipline, in University of Pennsylvania, but they wanted to tie it to economics. Is there anything we can say about personality traits and how you act with money or career or success or not? So the predictive power of personality traits, right out of this study. This section discusses the empirical evidence on the power of personality in predicting life outcomes. A growing body of evidence suggests that personality measures, especially those related to conscientiousness and to a lesser extent neuroticism, predict a wide range of outcomes. The predictive power of any particular personality measure tends to be less than predictive of IQ, but in some case it rivals it. That's one of the things we talked about a lot in our previous look at this. So it's just kind of a summary statement of their entire findings before presenting a detailed survey of the effects of personality and cognition on a variety of outcomes. It's useful to have an overview of the main findings. One principal finding of our survey, consistent with the claims of early psychologists cited, is that conscientiousness is most predictive of the big five across many outcomes. However, other personality measures predict some outcomes. So this goes back a long time, where out of all the personality traits, if you're trying to predict success or struggle in somebody, it seems that conscientiousness seems to be the hinge point and most predictive of all personality traits. That holds up in a lot of studies, including the one we're going to look at today specifically for nutrition. So looking at conscientiousness again, it's, are you fastidious? Are you particular? Are you, again, not neurotic, but you're that person, like, I need this phone to be at a right angle. Like, I can't stand it to be offset. I need to make sure, you may see my background. Like, I don't have my camera at an angle, so you can't see this. It's got to be perfect. I am highly, highly conscientious to the point of overplaying it. To my credit, that is predictive of success, because it means I'm probably going to be a workaholic. I'm probably going to, be a perfectionist. I want to, if getting a 9 is good, I want an 18. Tell me what the world record is, because even though I'm just starting this hobby, that's now my goal on day 2. Like, that's somebody who's conscientious. If you are the opposite of conscientious, you're just like, whatever, it's all good. I'll do that tomorrow. And so you can see just the amount of work output and expectation has a lot to do with that. When it comes to nutrition, and we start talking about, I diet pretty well some days. Gee, why aren't I losing weight? Or, oh yeah, I track my macros, I weigh and measure. Here's my food prep. I got 64 containers already in the fridge for the week. That person's probably going to have a higher chance of success, but it's not without its problems. It's one of the things I want to talk about today. So all big five traits predict some health outcomes. However, conscientiousness is the most predictive and better predicts longevity than intelligence or background. Personality measures predict health both through the channel of education and by improvising or improving health-related behavior, such as smoking. Um, One of the things in going back to this whole study from their School of Economics, um, besides conscientiousness, the next couple, which ties right into the study I chose for today, were openness, open-mindedness, and love of learning, because information is particularly useful if you're trying to improve an outcome, and perseverance for this particular study on finances. So stick-to-itiveness, you fail once, you keep going, that kind of thing. There's a little bit, maybe it's just an outlier, but there's a little bit of incongruity to that with this next study. So for health and longevity, conscientiousness, openness, and agreeableness. I had forgotten about this when I looked. Our new study confirms this that we're going to talk about next, but it's just not what I would have thought. This is one of the things that was a bit of a surprise, but it makes sense. Conscientiousness, we already described. That's pretty aggressive. Openness and agreeableness is the opposite. So it seems like openness and agreeableness are the buffers between conscientiousness and neuroticism. I can be conscientious, but I can take my foot off the gas. I can be open to new information. I can be open to some blind spots and biases that were blocking me, and now I'm open to new information. I'm agreeable. I'm not going to fight people on that kind of thing. And so those are the softer sides of our personality traits that can help buffer a more sharp or aggressive personality trait. I threw this up last time we did this just for fun. You can see this is my score. So I did the big five. There's my conscientiousness score, 96. And there's my extroversion, 4. So I like to just sit in my room and organize paper clips, things like that. That's my life. Emotional stability, at least I was above 50%. I think that's good. Agreeableness, right at 50. So maybe it depends on what day you get me. It could be nice. I could be grouchy. Um, Intellect, imagination, creativity, that was decent. Here is my VIA, values and action. So the 24 traits. Top strength out of 24, love of learning. Second straight, curiosity and interest in the world. Strength number 3, zest, enthusiasm, and energy. I'm pretty sure anybody who knows me would say, yeah, that's Joe. Appreciation of beauty and excellence. That's something I probably have cultivated more in my later life here. Leadership surprised me a bit. I guess I'm kind of a reluctant leader. Being a total introvert, I would much rather not. But in that role, I totally fine taking responsibility and getting stuff done. Probably back up toward the zest and energy and love of learning. Again, really cool. If you guys have never done this, viacharacter.org, you can take an abbreviated version of the survey and a longer one. So now, today, finally, this new study, personality traits and weight loss maintenance, a cross-sectional study. You guys have heard me talk about the National Weight Control Registry because it's a really cool ongoing database where people who have lost a certain amount of weight and have kept it off for a certain amount of time, they have registered to be a participant in this longitudinal study, and researchers can go and look at that. It's just an ongoing database, and they can create different research models to just dive into that data and see if they can extrapolate, new information, new correlations. Well, there was another one called the MedWeight Registry, uh, quite a bit smaller, 232 participants. I think it was overseas somewhere. I don't know if I have this on here. I want to almost say like Nordic states or something, but 232 participants, men and women, all the way from 18 to 65. Here's what was interesting about the MedWeight Registry. They wanted you to categorize yourself, unlike the, or maybe they do this just by the data input. But whereas the National Weight Control Registry was specifically a study of successful weight loss maintainers, This group they categorized as people who were successful and people who were not. So if you were greater than 25 BMI and then you intentionally lost weight and you did not gain more than 10% back, you were in the successful weight loss maintainer category. If you were somebody who regained greater than 95% of your weight back, then you were a regainer. And so out of these 232 participants, they can now go back and, as I said, do all kinds of statistical analysis. So I'm not going to go through all of this with you, but it just shows you, some of the quantitative data. Here's where we're looking at these correlational values. So when you look at the big five with their correlational opposites, that's what the TIPI, the 10 inventory or 10 item personality inventory, you will see that agreeableness had a high correlation. Attentional impulsiveness. This BIS, what was that called? I have it pulled up here. I'll think of it in a second. It's just another inventory. That was the actual type of survey they used to divide these out in the big five a little bit differently. But attentional impulsiveness, perseverance, and motor impulsiveness were the ones that correlated the highest. You want to get that P score, under 0.05, that sort of thing. And so those were the ones that showed a causal relationship. So let me pull those out in just an easier to read format here. So in maintainers, people who lost weight and then maintained it, agreeableness was super high. That was a high correlation. So again, pretty easygoing people who were open to new information, new methods. Here's what gets us a little bit of a curveball. Attention was higher in regainers. An ability to focus. So this is a tangent of conscientiousness. People who were the highest in attention were also the highest in attentional impulsiveness. I'm going to correlate this to what we know about information coming into our brain as stimuli and then how we react to it. But let me finish this slide here. Perseverance was also higher in regainers. In that economic study, perseverance was higher and also correlational for those who were successful. So why with diet, why would perseverance be higher in regainers? Could be just some kind of a weird quirk outlier, could be a bad interpretation of data, the way they did survey stuff, but I don't want to assume that. I want to give the researchers their due and just say, well, they thought that out, and it, at least on face value, there may be something to extrapolate. And of course, motor impulsiveness. So when information comes into my brain, let me give you this example. You're driving down the highway at night, and right out of a bush on the side of the road, a deer jumps out in front of your car. Simple, single stimulus. Visual stimulus, instantaneous, deer in front of your car. Automatically, a lot of different parts of your brain are going to fire at once. Your cerebellum, your motor cortex, maybe your hippocampus for memory, your amygdala for fear and threat, your neocortex for, oh shit, what do I do? Obviously your optic centers, like everything is going to be firing at once. Different situation. You're on your second date. You kind of like this person. And in a movie, he or she touches your hand. Ooh, still a single stimulus, whole different reaction in your brain. A lot of different parts of your brain are firing at once, and you are interpreting that stimulus, and you are having visceral reactions, the deer or the date. You're thinking now, your neocortex, oh, what do I do now in the car or in the movie theater? Yeah, like a lot. And how you even interpret that. Oh, did that person just brush my hand accidentally because I'm not confident? And why would that person want to touch me? Or like, wow, they really like me. You know, your environmental context, your past history, genetics, personality traits, which is what we're talking about today. All kinds of things go into how you're going to think through that and then what you're going to do acutely, and then how that creates brain patterns, neural patterns, and then how you just reflexively start to behave later. So, just with those two little somewhat opposing examples, let's go back through these correlating traits. If I am agreeable, if I'm very open-minded, then again, I'm probably going to be okay with sitting back and say, well, okay, this didn't work that well this week. I'm going to try this instead. Well, I remember so and so told me this worked for them. Let me go check that out. Um, oh, so, my coach, my trainer, they gave me this information. If I'm agreeable, I don't take that as a personal attack and, oh my gosh, they hate me or they think I'm stupid. I'm agreeable, so I think, oh yeah, it's good information. I'm glad they gave me that constructive criticism. So again, how we interpret things matters. An agreeable personality trait is going to be more amenable to change and patience and that kind of work. But attention may cross the line from conscientiousness to neuroticism. If I'm really hyper focused and hyper vigilant, now my amygdala's online, and maybe that just brings up cortisol levels, and I'm just making knee-jerk reactions. That's why motor impulsiveness is higher. Uh, and that perseverance is another part of hypervigilance. So this is how, in that one study, perseverance was a good thing, financial, economic, career success. And yet, over here, in another context, it may not be the right trait. You may need to tamp that one down. So, hope I didn't lose anybody with that long, drawn out explanation. But with this particular study on weight regainers, they did a really good job, the researchers, in looking at correlational studies. And they said, here's this one great cross-sectional study of more than 50,000 participants. And impulsiveness, the attention, the perseverance, the motor impulsiveness, all of that combined correlated with the highest BMI people. So there seems to be a perfect storm of personality traits, 50,000 participants in this database, for people who just can't get it together to lose weight and sustain that. Attentional and motor impulsiveness was also the highest in binge eaters. Perseverance, again, in other studies, was higher in regainers, because it's almost to me a disservice to call it perseverance. I wish they just called it hypervigilance or something like that, because perseverance to me sounds like that should be a good trait. Um, and again, motor impulsiveness higher. So, those are things to consider. What I want to do now is a discussion, and I'll kind of start us off with this first point. Um, One of the most important studies I think anybody can understand, and that's why I throw it in your face so often, is that functional MRI study in the Harvard Department of Moral Psychology from Joshua Green. And they were looking at people who were going to act, so different stimuli, and then how I react to situations that test or challenge their goal alignment behavior. Given a situation, will this person do the right thing or not? This person says they're honest, they're that's their highest value, and then as soon as your back is turned, they're stealing from somebody. Like that's not a value, that's not behavior aligned with their goal. This person says they're super healthy. I don't eat this. I'm so self-righteous about how healthy I am. And then as soon as they're alone, they're hiding in the pantry, eating Oreo cookies. Again, not aligned. So who are the people and how do their brains work? What parts of their brain, and how can we relate that to personality traits, are the people who do the most aligned behavior with their true intrinsic values? And what they found is the neocortex part of our brain that is important for attention. It is important for perseverance. The people who act in alignment with their goals, their neocortex does not come online. They don't pause and think. They instantly react, not motor impulsiveness. They react in a like, I'm not that person. I don't do that. I do this. And that kind of intrinsic value system that's based in the emotional center, the limbic system of the brain, that's the part of their brain that lights up. So, faced with a challenge, I'm on the fourth day of my diet, doing great. I've lost 3 pounds. Oh man, I'm going to this wedding tonight. What am I going to do? Calculate my macros. Should I have a piece of cake? What's the macros on a piece of cake? Let me look that up. Well, if I do this and this, if I skip this meal, what if tomorrow I just run an extra 5K? And you know what? Matter of fact, they're gonna have my two favorite pieces. What's in two pieces of cake? Um, and you're thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. Guess what? That's hypervigilance. That's attention. That's the things that we might think are good. It's creating that gap in logotherapy between the stimulus and the action. We're contemplative. That should be a good thing, but most times it's not, because we need to get to the point where we just don't do it. Inside here, my values, I don't do that. I have committed to this, so this is what I do. Decision over. I don't have to think about it. I've thought about it in making this commitment. It's over. It's off the table. So let's talk about these things. And I want to even back up. I'm going to keep the screen share open so I can go back to some of these things. But I would just like to hear what you guys think about these different traits and some of the ways I presented it today. So feel free to jump in. Since I'm going to still share the screen, I'll only be able to see it one at a time. But Dr. Souders, you coming on?
Sure, I'll come on. I posted in the chat one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking about perseverance. Maybe in this context, the word rigidity comes to mind to me, because it seems like there's a relationship there. Perseverance can be the result of rigidity. For instance, you were talking about what sounded like a description of orthorexia. And so that has gone beyond agreeableness and into a perseverance in a fashion that is rigidity. So for instance, like if I'm in the wedding situation, but I'm in a diet, well, if I can, it depends, what am I in a diet for, right? So here comes the agreeableness. Well, am I in contest prep? Then I'm probably not going to eat the cake. If I'm in contest prep, I'm going to bring my own food to the wedding and explain it. If my friends love me, then they'll be fine with it. On the other hand, I might be, if I'm just like, okay, I'm getting ready for bathing suit season or something, I might say, well, I'll have, I'll look at all the cakes. I'll find the one that I like the most. I'll have that one, and I won't have a lot of it. And a little bit will satisfy my desires and curiosities. And then I'm just not going to worry about it, because if I go right back to what I'm doing, then it's going to be fine. It's not that big of a blip on the radar screen. So, the rigidity factor of it can, I think, make a big difference there. That is not quite the same as perseverance. And I noted what you said there, Joe, about perseverance generally seems like a good trait. So maybe there needs to be a little distinction there. The other thing I noted while you were talking is, this sort of distractibility, things like that. You and I know Dr. David Hanscom very well, and what that comes across with the thinking part is really, now this thinking may involve a lot of cognitive distortions. And so the if-thens that these involuntary cognitive distortions produce, they kind of define neuroticism. And oftentimes the most conscientious, the most well-intentioned, the most hardworking people also have the highest levels of these cognitive distortions, or at least the most disruption from them. And that's where these repetitive, unwanted thoughts, the ruts, come from. So I just wanted to toss those out there. I think this is really, really interesting and it makes a lot of sense, but I think there's a lot of nuance that these bins or categories of personality traits don't readily differentiate between. What do you think about that, Joe?
That was so well said. I'm glad you brought up cognitive distortions too. We did an entire research review. If you guys want a good one, I believe it's Dr. Burns' work. We have a really good one on that. But so I went back up to the values in action, character traits, and virtues here because you're right. Like perseverance doesn't show up here. And so that's why I said that, 10-item personality inventory based on the big five you can probably try to make things too simple and therefore lose that nuance. But the good parts of perseverance, as you said, when you're leaving out rigidity, that's why agreeableness and open-mindedness were also correlational traits. That's what kind of tempers the perseverance or the conscientiousness. So, over here on the VIA scale, you're looking at, oh, I guess it is. There is persistence right there in the courage.
Persistence, yeah.
Yeah, bravery, honesty, zeal. Again, that's just that high doing, high action kind of trait. But yeah, perfectly well said on just explaining that we have to avoid rigidity.
And
That's
then
the opposite.
balanced in wisdom with the curiosity and the judgment, love of learning again. I can be excited about seeing what happens when I eat that piece of wedding cake, and see, well, this is an opportunity for me to have an experience and learn from it.
Mhm.
So that again goes into the bigger bin of, agreeableness.
Yeah. And Kevin added compulsiveness as a synonym, which I totally agree with. That definitely gets into that motor impulsiveness. And, hypervigilance also to me just lends in or leads right into catastrophizing, which is another cognitive distortion.
Mhm.
If I'm too attentionally aware, too hyper focused, too much of a perfectionist, I'm probably distorting in the fact that it just weighs too much on me. Because again, in that little role play of the wedding scenario, like you can tell I was running through a lot of chaotic, frenetic thoughts where it could have been just like, hey, okay, just eat one piece of cake. You're good. Like, you could have just made that decision and you still employed some flexibility, but it wasn't like a lot of strain and stress. Any other thoughts, you guys? I see somebody, yeah, all or nothing is a distortion. Anybody else, just feel free to unmute and jump on. But I also want you guys to scan some of these phrases uh, and think of your left brain, right brain, your more accepting soft side versus your I have to get things done side. And I was just talking to one of my coaches that I'm mentoring for his business growth, and he made this statement like, I'm really striving for balance. Like I really need balance in my life. And yet at the same time, he said, I really needed to get this done with my business, and I need to do this, and I know I need to do this, and so forth. And yet he's also saying, I need balance. We talk a lot about with macronutrient tracking and weight and so forth. A single day is not necessarily the biggest metric of winning or losing. So balance could be I work 120 hours this week and next week I'm on vacation with my family. That's not daily balance, but it's balance. Maybe this is a season of my life I really need to work hard. When I was in college working up to 5 jobs at a time, there was nothing balanced about my life. But I love my life. I put in a concentrated amount of work then, so someday I will work less. And as a trade to actually build the career I want to build, there was nothing balanced about that unless you look at the totality of the life that I want to live. So look at some of these things and let's pick some out together of where they may help us. Obviously we think of things over in moderation as self-control, prudence, modesty. That those are traits that would go really well with trying to change my body composition. But we know openness and agreeableness is important. In that same category is forgiveness. So can I forgive myself for not being perfect today and try and be better tomorrow? That gets into the longevity of agreeableness. But what do you guys think as you just contemplate some of the things you've said today and maybe look at this particular more comprehensive scale? And if nobody jumps in, I'm definitely going to call on Kevin, because his doctoral dissertation had to do with self-determination theory, which uh, is kind of an underlying foundation of all of this. Dr. Brunacini?
I'm just having a hard time trying to synthesize all of this into something of that, like, man, I'll just use myself. And when I've done the Gallup's poll, which is the strength finders. I've done the big five strengths as well. And my top one, unsurprising, is conscientiousness. And it's surprising. It's interesting to hear that that was a negative thing, although I can certainly understand as you tease it out how that just builds in, can lead to impulsiveness, but just overcautiousness, of which is, from a business perspective, was me. I'm not gonna go out and market until I have my pitch absolutely perfect. Otherwise, screw it, I'll just stay home. Um, but
Well,
that
remember, let me interrupt for just 1 second. Conscientiousness was correlated very highly for success. It's just that some of those tangential offshoots, the way they describe it in the 10-item personality inventory. So across the board, conscientiousness is correlated to success. But if
uh,
you cross the line into rigidity, compulsion, that sort of thing.
I misinterpreted. Well, then I really don't have probably anything else to add other than every strength has its limit. Every strength can be a weakness as well, or we can overutilize our strength, as Corey would say. So, um, to that point, everything is a continuum. Tread carefully with whatever skill set you have, because it can also be your enemy, if you will. Um, so yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to come back to this slide, because if you understand, and if you do take that viacharacter.org inventory, you might look at some of these and say, no problem, Brittany, appreciate you being here. You might realize, like, wow, I do score low in this, and it's not a big focus of mine. Maybe I need to work on that. Just like knowing that agreeableness is and openness correlates high to success. What if you are just super, super high in courage and justice? You are all about bravery and persistence and honesty and fairness and leadership and getting everything done. And yet none of those show up. None of those show up in the strengths correlated to success. Yet the opposite, agreeableness and openness, do. So if you know that and you've taken that inventory, you can say, well, geez, like, what do I need to do? Like, what is it about my background, how I was raised? Genetic personality is the vast majority of the ball game. I've had conversations with my siblings, like, my DNA is as close as anybody, to my siblings as anybody. And so we all struggle with some of the same things. And if that's what is completely part of your hardwired neurological DNA and you don't like it, you can't change it unless you know what's there. Know some of these things right here that are perhaps bufferers or opposites, and then you can start working on those. So I'm telling you, I have had to do this a lot in my life. A lot of the things that I didn't like about myself, as Kevin just said, they may have served me well to accomplish some things, but leading to anxiety, higher blood pressure, this, that. Okay, well, I don't want that part of that strength, so I better bend into another direction. And so I've had to give myself the permission to grow into appreciation of beauty and things like that, forgiveness, just, creativity. I now plan creative time to get me out of my conscientious neuroticism mode. I make myself do things that I like, which sounds counterintuitive, but it works. Because that's how you grow those new neural networks. So again, if anybody has any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear them, because this I think is an important part of how we live our entire lives.
Well, I'll jump in and just say, I did my VIA character strengths profile. It was very interesting because I did exactly that, was use the results to make some changes. So here, if you look among my top, so I will list honesty, judgment, prudence, self-regulation, fairness. There I am hitting all those buttons. But above them all, by the longest shot, was gratitude, which seems to be one of those things that is an incredible balancer. So it was higher than all those other of my top 5. And then right below it was forgiveness, hope, love of learning, those kinds of things. So, and where I saw some areas down below, that were not as good, was spirituality and humor, and social intelligence. And so, those are things where it was one of the reasons why I was comfortable letting music go, in order to replace it with some other activities, of a more personal journey type, which I think actually did do some very positive things sort of for my overall mental health psychology. It gave me a little bit more balanced perspective, just like you mentioned that you did, Joe. And I think these tests are good to take, just because you can't take them too seriously, right? Because there's so much nuance. On the other hand, if you see something where you're really down much further below than the bulk of your traits, it's like, yeah, I mean, what could be the harm, right? What could be the worst possible thing that could happen to me by focusing more on spirituality? So I did.
Well, yeah, to that point, it's a great way to close this. These are also all in contexts. So in some situations, you need to tap into a trait that may be down the list, and that's just the appropriate trait to exercise. And just because something is first and something is last doesn't mean that the one in last place is zero. These are all 24 of these are intentionally positive traits. They're all strengths. So you just may have one strength that's just a focus of yours and not another. You can take these kind of inventories every 5 or 10 years, and you would probably see some shifting because your life and your priorities and your personal growth is evolving. So yeah, I mean, to your point, so spirituality for me is dead last, and yet I'm an incredibly emotional person who puts extreme value on the connections and so forth that are not just physiological, physical type things. It's, I put that in that bucket of spirituality, but some of these other things I just do more of. I'm better at. I like, to orient my life around those. So I'm gonna let you guys go. I really appreciate you being here. I know we need to do these more often, but with our DIQs and things like that, we're just want to make sure we're cognizant of your time. If you guys have any questions about this and you want to throw them in our chat in the app, you certainly can. And I'll have a replay of this in the very near future. So you guys have a good weekend. I appreciate you being here. See you, Jen, Kevin, everybody.